It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Thursday, February 27th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content. Really does wonder what Danny Briere is going to do at this trade deadline.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. I've been podcasting about the Flyers, the NHL, and hockey for a decade. I'm here with prospect expert and Flyers credentialed reporter for 19 years, Russ Cohen. To keep up with our latest episodes and Flyers news, you can find us at Locked On Flyers on all your favorite socials, and of course, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, we have intermittently been talking about the Ryan Johansen situation with the Flyers. There's a little bit of an update on that this week. Plus, we got some, I think, fiery conversation with John Tortorella related to the trade deadline. We're going to get into that. Plus, later in the show, we're going to take a look at the U.S. National Team Development Program and are they achieving their goals, and what are those goals relative to the draft and potential future Flyers draft picks, as well as dig into draft eligible prospect Michael Misa. So a ton to get to today on the show, but we did have the Players Association and League hearing this week on the Ryan Johansen grievance that was filed way back in September, right?
Yeah, and I do think the Flyers dragged their feet on it for a while because they were having cap problems, and now they don't have a cap problem. So,
Right.
my guess is they're going to settle. But the problem here is while they have cap space to do that, they're not going to have much cap space to retain at the deadline, and that hurts them.
Right. And I think, it is important that the Flyers know what the result is of this hearing prior to, I would say, even this weekend,
Right.
leading up to negotiations as the trade deadline approaches a week from tomorrow. And the cap hit in total is $4 million because there was retained salary. It was an $8 million contract. And right now, the Flyers do have like a little over $6 million in cap space. But if 4 of that is taken up by this, what would they retain in a potential deal for somebody else?
Yeah, it wouldn't be much. It still might only be half, but either way, it cuts down on what your effectiveness can be at the deadline for the kind of team that you are, and it's not a great spot. But we'll see what happens. Maybe they'll win the case.
Maybe they will, and, this is, of course, as of recording. If some sort of announcement
Right.
comes, prior to this episode going live, of course, we'll put it on our socials. But that does lead directly into the conversation that John Tortorella had after practice yesterday with some of the media who were there, and they dug pretty deep into trade deadline conversations with Torts, which I thought was really interesting because Torts is right in that Danny Briere is the one you got to ask these questions to. He's
That
just
is
not
correct.
available day to day. So it makes sense to ask John Tortorella because he's the guy you have in front of you, right?
Right. But we also know that John has a fair amount of input, and that's why they're asking him. If this were Brad Shaw, they wouldn't, and Brad Shaw were like an interim coach, they wouldn't be asking him.
Right.
It's John. The
Correct.
terms are different with him.
No, it absolutely is. And he said as much, right? That he communicates with Danny on a very regular basis about players. He was asked specifically about, does he get asked about potential return and the details of these trades and the value? And he pretty much said, yeah, that, he discusses what he thinks about different players and what their value is and what he brings. And what potential return players in a deal could bring to the organization. And I think, the kind of metaphor that was brought up in that conversation is who's on the bus, right?
Hmm.
Who's going to be on the bus to lead the Flyers to success? And you want the right combination of people on that bus, and you can't fall in love with any particular player you have because it may make sense to trade them, bring somebody else on the bus that's going to drive you to the Stanley Cup playoff.
Sure. And while this all sounds good, they have a back room of people that are doing a lot of hard work and pointing out good and bad and probably showing players that can be had and what your players aren't doing. And I do question what John actually looks at for that. And that's something where that's where you kind of like shouldn't give John too much input because you have to respect what the work that those people are doing and look
Like
at
the
those.
analytics
The
folks.
athletics department, yeah, and look at those things. You can't just go with feel or who you think a Torts player is. Look at what's happened with Barry Trotz in Nashville. Just I point that out.
Right. Now, interestingly enough, Jackie Spiegel asked that specifically
Hmm.
at this media availability about, depending on your term in office, quote unquote,
Right.
so to speak. That's not the term she used, but
Yeah.
in terms of his tenure as head coach, does he think about beyond that as far as the longer term success of the team? And I thought that he said, I guess what any coach would say is that he thinks about the good of the team in perpetuity until the second he's told he's not the coach anymore.
Okay. I mean, that's fine. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. But there is some
Yeah.
things, there are some answers he gave that I do have a problem with. So we'll get to them.
Such as,
Such as Rasmus Ristolainen. It is not a
yeah,
great contract. If it were, he'd be easy to trade. And we saw Kevin Kurz tweet out after speaking with Danny Briere that he hasn't been getting many calls, and it probably does explain why there's not a lot of scouts right now at Wells Fargo. But like there was a ton of scouts in Montreal. One of them being a Flyer scout, by the way. So that's a little telling, and so that's something where business may have slowed down on him because of the extra years and it's just enough of a cap hit where you're like, well, he's not an offensive defenseman. He's a good defenseman. He's not a great defenseman. And showcasing him on the power play is not going to put it over the top. It's more about retention. And we just talked about retention.
right. I think that's the issue, right? Is that
Yes.
his contract is 5.1. He's got 2 more years. If he had 1 more year, I think you could swing it a
Right.
little bit easier. And that's why I think it's going to be much, much easier to trade a guy like him next trade deadline,
Right.
especially because he has been a good defenseman, and
Hmm.
I think it's fair for John Tortorella to have said he's one of the most improved players he's seen in his tenure
That's
as Flyers
true, but not
coach.
one of the best contracts. That's not true.
Correct. I agree with that. I agree with that. I think the term was too long on this contract. I
Yeah.
think given how he plays now, maybe the value is there. Maybe it's only slightly over what it should be. Maybe it should be 4.5 or something like that instead of 5.1. But I think it's just the term that's the issue. And
Well, it is
so
definitely.
I don't think it'd be a bad thing to have Risto around for another year as a defenseman on the Flyers. I think it would be great if they could get a 2026 first for him. It doesn't seem like that's possible. So let's have a good defenseman on the Flyers in the meantime.
That's fine, but you do have to create spots. You have to create a spot
Yep.
for Neil Andre. You have to create a spot for maybe somebody else that's unforeseen right this moment that might make the team, or for just general call ups. You might want to create a spot where you have a third goalie who's literally doing nothing.
Well, that is also true. So I do think that there's ways around this, and there's other guys you can trade. There's somebody you
Mhm.
can ask to waive a no trade clause, if you so desire.
Mhm.
In Nick Sealer, I think even though that is a good
So
contract
let's do role
overall,
play. You be
but
Danny Briere. You come up to me and tell me, as John Tortorella, that now you're going to ask Nick Sealer to do that because you want to trade him. How do you think that's going to go?
it's not going to go great. But
No.
I think and I don't know that that's something you do this year. I think that's
Right.
a next year thing to maybe
Yeah.
clear the roster spot.
Yeah.
For sure. I just think we're not gonna solve some of these problems until next season. I just don't realistically see a way around it given the circumstances the Flyers are in right now.
Right. But Eric Johnson, you definitely could set him loose.
Oh,
He's
yeah,
been a
bag of
good,
pucks, future
yeah. Future
considerations, that's
considerations, you
fine.
take the roster spot. There's
Yep,
definitely things that can be
yep.
done for sure.
Yeah, because I'm perfectly okay with sitting Zamula
Right.
for the time being as a 7th defenseman.
Right.
I think that's fine. Or trade him. One of
Yeah.
those 2.
Either way, because you know what he is. You need to find out what Andre is. Like you need him up
Yep.
playing for the rest of the season.
Yep, absolutely. I think that is the ultimate conclusion here is that we need Andre up. We need a potential spot for to rotate through some of the other defensemen.
Yeah, I don't even talk
And
about Grimes anymore because I think they just don't have interest, and I think he's going to do something somewhere else. So yeah, that's just the way it is.
yeah, I mean, we'll see there, but I do think we need to create that space,
Yeah,
and trading Risto is the most ideal way to do it, but I just the realistic nature of what's going on. If they can do it, great, I'll be happy. If they can't, I think that's
and
understandable
Scott
too. Because
Lawton, you know, as great a guy as he is, he should be traded. Like his value is
yeah, if
high
they can. Yep.
because otherwise,
Not at the highest it's been, but it's still
no, but it's
pretty
still
high.
pretty high because he's a reasonable contract. They can retain on him because it's not much, and you could get something good. You're not getting the first. They have to move off the first, like unless it's
Yeah,
a 2028 first or something like that. Move off of that, trade him, give him a chance to win. If he really wants to come back, hey, you can sign him in the offseason. Like that's a reality, but it usually doesn't
yeah.
happen. We know that.
Nope, it does not, and, if we recall, we still have Cam Atkinson and Kevin Hayes' salary to deal with next season as well, to the tune of
Yeah,
5.3 million.
Kevin Hayes
So
played yesterday, right? I didn't even notice.
he did. He did. Alright, well, speaking of these, like, potential future draft picks that the Flyers could get with a return on one of these guys, US national team development program is a big part of USA Hockey now, and just thought we'd talk about the program and what its mission is and the divergent mission that it has, and is it successful, and should the Flyers be focused on guys from this program at all? Given all of that, we're gonna do that coming up next. If you're like me, mornings have to start with a good cup of coffee. I got tired of settling for basic grocery store pods. They just weren't cutting it. And that's why I turned to Trade. And let me tell you, this is next level coffee. Trade is the number one specialty coffee marketplace in the US. It brings you fresh coffee from over 50 of the country's top roasters. Their experts have taste tested thousands of coffees, curating over 450 amazing roasts. Whether you're new to coffee or know exactly what you like, they'll handpick the perfect match for you. And I found a local Philadelphia roaster I'd always wanted to try. My first bag was a game changer. It had such a smooth, rich flavor. I could actually taste the difference from my usual coffee. Their subscription makes it so easy. There's no more last minute grocery store runs or settling for whatever is on the shelf. Right now, Trade is exclusively offering our listeners 40% off your first order at drinktrade.com/lockedonnhl. That's drinktrade.com/lockedonnhl for 40% off your first order at drinktrade.com/lockedonnhl. On tomorrow's show, we will recap the second half of the home and home with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Plus, we are going to look at the playoff race as it currently stands and really what the Flyers should be focusing on from a draft perspective as it relates to that. The US national team development program was started in 1996, a very long time ago now. It
Yeah,
feels like just yesterday,
it
but
does.
it's been a while. And they have this dual mission, right? So it's designed to focus on U18 players in the United States to find a batch of players that they can find success with on national team levels. So for their U17 team, for the U18 team, for the World
Right,
Juniors
right.
team, right? But then also set up these players for success in professional careers. And I find it interesting, like, what's the balance between those 2 goals, and how do they try and accomplish both at the same time? Because I think one kind of feeds into the other, reputational, right?
Yeah, I think the balance is it's good that they have the 17 and 18 team because again, some guys, the really super advanced ones, can play on both. That's
Right.
fine. Or they could just play up, and that's good. But it also gives guys a chance to break in, kind of go through the elite training these guys go through. They have the shooting rooms there. They have all kinds of things, a lot of things that, a USHL team normal USHL team may not have. And so it's good. They have done a very good job over the years of building a standard to get great players. Now, there's always going to be exceptions to this. There's going to be guys that get cut and do great elsewhere. There's going to be guys that play third and fourth line, second and third pair that go elsewhere and decide they're going to play somewhere else in the USHL to get out from under, so to speak, and star and have a better draft position. But
Right.
the ones that are true stars, like a James Hagens, as an example, like those kinds of guys thrive there. There's always going to be ups and downs. This year's team isn't the best team. It's not.
Right.
But everybody got spoiled with how good they were probably the last 3 years in a row, as an example. And you could see that when you see the World Juniors teams and and even before that, the Four Nations, guys like Matthews and such. So yeah, I think was a great idea. I think it's still really good. The issue now is we don't know what's going to happen with the USHL with the way now that college hockey is structured,
Yeah.
and also with the way the Canadian Hockey League, the way they're able to like change the way they've been doing business. So my guess is for like the USHL, they may have to go younger than they used to. And so then my thought is if they go younger than they used to, because like, let's say it's hard to play in the OHL at 15. It is.
Right.
Guys do it. They get exceptional status. They do it. Even at 16, it's hard. Maybe the USHL has to get those guys, and then they decide where they want to go after that. Now that you can move about without being any penalty from league to league. And so if they do that, then you kind of wonder, do they need a U17 team anymore if they keep the program? Like things that go through my head.
Right. So I think like the U17 portion of the program, I think is such a critical part of the mission because it does kind of really decide where these guys are going to get fed into one of those three paths, right?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of staying with the national team development program, the USHL college, are they going to be on a college track through the USHL as a
But they can go on a track through the
stopping point?
OHL to college
Right,
now,
right.
where they
And
couldn't
so
before.
right, so now there's 3 tracks instead of 2, and will that kind of destabilize the national team development program a little bit? Like, are some of the top guys gonna jump ship? And with the other stated goal of having success as a national team, like, how is that gonna affect that? Because you have guys that aren't gonna be playing together nonstop. You're gonna have to kinda re-centralize as kinda Hockey Canada does in a lot of ways, and I think that was the whole point of the NTDP was to kinda get a leg up on Canada by
Right.
not having to centralize, right?
Right. So yeah, first part of it is all the leagues that make up the Canadian Hockey League. And so now it's all fair
Right,
game, right?
right,
Uh when all this was being talked about uh was last year, and I was with some people that I know, and we were talking informally to colleges, and they were already deciding what players they were going to go after. So you could have been a big program and you were like now going after certain players from the OHL, the Q, whatever. But now even the other programs, the lesser ones could now get some of those players and really improve themselves. And so that's been going on now and will probably continue to go on next year. And so then after that, then you have to wonder, yeah, are all US elite players going to be still going there? And I don't know. I don't know what the answer is going to be because now players have choices. I get some emails once in a while for people asking, "Hey, what do you think my son should do?" And I try and give them the best answer I can because I feel like my answer has always been get a college degree, get a free ride at any school you can. And I still hold that. But now it's the in between that's the hard thing to tell somebody what to do. Go to the
yeah.
OHL, go to the USHL, like go to the Q. Like now it's a little bit tougher to figure out. So I do think it matters on the player and where they are and can they be away from home and all those things. Like these are all factors. And then after that, the USHL now has to kind of figure out what kind of league they're going to be because the NTDP plays in that too.
Right. Now, looking just at the success rates, of the NTDP, I would say at the U18 level, their kind of peak was in the 2010s, right? They won a whole bunch of gold medals in the
Yes.
early mid 2010s, right? And then those players kind of aged up a little bit, and we saw, 3 to 5 years later, the success at the U20 level, which
Right.
makes sense, right?
Right.
Because the US won the last 2 gold medals at World Juniors,
Which
and
a
in
decade
20
ago was unheard of. Couldn't happen.
Right, right, and then they also won in 2021, so they've won
Right.
3 out of the last 5 gold medals,
Right.
which is great, but now, like, is the pipeline there for that to continue? I don't think so, because you look at the U18, U17, and then with this schism happening that you were just talking about with all the different development paths, it feels like this is a tipping point here for this whole program.
I think it's close. I don't think that's quite at the tipping point, but I just remember early in the season interviewing Cullen Potter, who is the son of Jenny Potter, and he had a lot of options. He could have certainly played for the program, but he decided to go as an 18-year-old and go right into college and play at ASU, and he's doing pretty good. And it's his draft year this year, and that's a bold step to take. And he completely sidestepped that whole program. He could have been a really terrific player for them this year, but didn't do it. Just went straight to college. So if more people start sidestepping it that have a lot of talent, then they could be in trouble.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it goes in the grand scheme, and, the Flyers haven't picked somebody from the NTDP since picking Cutter Gauthier
Right.
in 2022, and so, the Flyers have been kinda disconnected from the last couple of years of that program in the last few years, and, they haven't had as strong a draft as they had since 2019. Like, that was the peak,
Right.
right, where Jack Hughes went 1st overall, and they had, like, a whole slew of other first round picks that year,
Yeah.
but it's kinda tapered off a little bit since then, so,
Mhm.
will be interesting to see how this program develops and becomes, continues itself as a feeder system into the league. But Michael Misa is a Canadian, so he is separate from this discussion. We are
Yep.
going to talk about him as a potential draft pick coming up next.
When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you could stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you could even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three. I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit fanduel.com to join today. That's fanduel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
All right, Russ, Michael Misa. Man, this kid is on a tear
Oh, yeah.
right now. He is that 1C that you're looking for
Yep.
in the draft. Like, this is the way to get a 1C, right? Is
It
a
is.
guy like Michael Misa and drafting him. Now, he plays at Saginaw in the OHL. They're 4th in the Western Conference of the OHL. They haven't clinched a playoff spot, but they will.
They
It's
will.
just a matter of time here. His older brother Luke is a Flames prospect. And also, interestingly, he played with Jet Luchenko in the U17s
Yep.
on one of the split Canadian squads in 2023, right?
Yeah. So there's some familiarity there. Listen, like, I guess it was a little more than 2 years ago. He was thought he could go #1 in this draft. So he's probably not going to now. And we talked about him a little bit last year because of
Right.
you know, the end of the year, how he finished strong, how the Mem Cup and all that. And I thought he looked really good. But again, he just didn't have the year everybody thought he would. And now he's having that year everybody thought he would.
Yeah, so the last game that he played where he did not have a point was December 28th.
Oh my God.
He went 2 games in a row off the score sheet in late December, and now it's been 23 games as of this last Sunday where he has had at least 1 point on the board, whether it's a goal or an assist. He is the top points getter in the OHL right now with 113 points
That's it.
in 54 games played. And now he's only second in goals with Nick Lardis, who's a
Yeah.
Blackhawks prospect,
Right.
has 63 goals in 56
Which
games,
is
which is
insane.
bonkers. Absolutely insane. But 113 points in 54 games is ridiculous for this guy. He's got 3 hat tricks this season. And I looked at his 54 goals, 18 of them were on the power play. So that's
Yeah.
pretty balanced, like in
No,
terms of what
he's
you would want it to be, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, he does a lot of things. He's fast. He is a great decoy, so he knows how to draw the defense to him and get those assists. So he's not just a
Right.
goal guy. Uh,
Exactly.
he does have a great shot. There's no doubt about it. He has a real quick release. Like the puck is off his stick very quickly. He needs to get physically stronger if he really does want to be a 1C. His faceoffs are pretty good, and he's got quick hands. So I do think he's got the tools to do it. It's just, what's he going to be more electric at? Is he going to be more electric in the middle? Is he going to be more electric on the wing? That'll be the question that sort of gets answered down the road. But right now, he is a 1C type. We'll see if he stays that way. But again, love him on the power play, the way he distributes. I love the fact that he could toe drag around guys. I love the fact that he has two-step quickness. Like that's really what I'm talking about with his speed. Like you can
Right.
see that. And on defense, he's very active. Like his stick is active. Nobody's gonna slag him on D. I mean, they like him. So he definitely will be terrific at the next level. He is the kind of guy, though, that I don't care if he gets drafted second, third, fourth, fifth. I'm not putting him in the NHL right away. I want this guy to build himself up physically before he plays in the NHL. I don't care where you draft him.
Yeah, and he's pretty solidly third amongst most
Yeah,
of the lists right now. There's an occasional fourth or fifth, and there's one first overall. There was one second
I
overall that
have
I
him second.
saw. Well, your most recent list, you have him third,
No,
but
that's true. I had him second, then I moved him to third. You're right. I forgot that.
you did. You did. But I think that he is just one of those guys that, if he's available, you have to take him.
Oh, yeah. I
And
mean, it's not like he's small. It's not like you're gonna find excuses. Uh,
right.
I mean, if you wanna take somebody 6'4" instead of him, that's fine. Uh,
But 6'1" is not small.
no.
It's just normal. So
Right. I mean, that's kind of like where they're at now, like scouts where they're at. And yeah,
right.
I still think it's funny. Do I still think he could still um go second? Yeah, I do. I think there's a world where he could go second, Schaefer goes first, and Hagens goes third or fourth, depending on what teams are looking for. So it could shake out a lot of different ways.
Yeah. Now, where the Flyers are right now, they're either gonna pick, like, in the 8 to 10 range
Yeah,
as it currently stands, or they would jump up to the 1
right,
or 2 slot. So the only way they're getting Misa is probably if they're in the number 2 slot, is my
right,
guess, right?
right.
Do you
And
take him at 2?
do I take him over Hagens? No, no,
But if
because
Higgins goes 1, do you
yes,
take
but
him at 2?
sure, but somebody's taking Schaefer one or two. That's the problem.
You
That's
think?
Yeah. So I think that's the issue here. That's the problem with the puzzle here. Uh, because I think there are some people out there, like I see these tweets, well, I'm not loving the year James Hagen's having. Well, he's more than a point a game in college at 18 years old. So it's a lot
Right.
harder competition than what Michael Misa is facing. No offense,
Correct.
no offense
Correct.
to him. So, but yeah, I mean, I guess, is there a world where you decide you want him over Hagens? Maybe, maybe it's not my world, but it could be somebody's. Would the Flyers do it? I don't know. I just don't know. Not yet. I don't have a good feel yet. Maybe I'll get a better feel for it closer to the draft. Maybe I'll figure it out.
Yeah, now it's like a big giant if, right?
Yes.
For the Flyers to have the opportunity to pick him.
Yeah.
But should that opportunity arise, like then if you're looking at the future of your team at center, with a Michael Misa and Jet Luchenko, like that's pretty good, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, uh, I think then you are kind of affording yourself the opportunity where if one's a 1 or one's a 2, it doesn't matter which one it is.
Correct. I
Like
think so.
that's and that's a good thing. That's kind of like, what the Oilers went through with McDavid and Nugent Hopkins, and they also had Draisaitl after a bit. They had that too, but it does afford you that luxury. So that's not a bad problem to have.
Yeah, I think so. And so, again, it is a very specific circumstance where I think the Flyers would have an opportunity to pick him, but
Yeah,
centers are so hard to come by that I just feel like it's really, really important for the Flyers to take advantage of opportunities like this, especially in this draft where you could get a winger with some high upside and potential with one of your lower picks in the first round.
yeah. I mean, the only way Misa could slip is if somebody takes Martone right in that top 5. Somebody takes McQueen earlier, even though he's been injured most of the year. There's
Yep.
always that chance. There is. It's the
Yep.
draft. We've seen weirder things happen.
I know, I know. Well, and we still don't know what's gonna happen with the Flyers for the remainder of the season and where they'll end up for sure,
Right.
but so there's a lot of moving pieces and parts here, but for now, like, I really feel strongly that taking a strong center like this is a really good option for them at this
It
point.
is. It is. Because again, you take him at center. If he were to turn into a top line winger, you're not going to cry about it.
All right, that will do it for today's show. Thanks so much for listening. We will be back tomorrow to talk part 2 of the home and home against Pittsburgh and get set for this trade deadline as well as look ahead to next week's action. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. You can send in your mailbag questions or Flyers thoughts to any of our socials at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology on the same socials, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. For your next listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert. Get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.